This conference will now be recorded.
All right, welcome everybody. So I was just doing some brief introductions. My name is Micah Mosher. I'm the Client Development Manager here at Twin State Technical Services, and we're on the road to October, which is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So we've put together a fun way of remembering some of the things that are key to cybersecurity, and hopefully some fun analogies that'll help you share why and where cybersecurity is important in an easily digestible way, which you'll get the pun because it's going to be full of puns today. A little bit of food puns, a little bit of some old 90s pop culture puns, and some automotive puns. So if you've got some, or if you think of some along the way, don't worry. Join me in being punny. So with introductions, if it's okay, I'm just going to go around the room real quick and do some introductions. So I mentioned that my name is Micah, but we've got a few here that I would like everyone to get to know each other. Digitally send your business cards afterwards if you're interested. And at the end, we'll be doing a survey. Melina, who's on the line, will be moderating the chat, but also sending out a survey at the end because these events really are driven by our community's feedback of what they're interested in. And we rate ourselves and try to do better every time. So don't hold back. Please give us some feedback and we'll continue to do better and more timely topics of things that are important to you. So Zach, I see you're in my top left corner. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So my name is Zach Ball. I'm the territory account manager for SMB for Fortinet.
Great. Luke?
Yeah, I'm Luke Rushing. I'm the IT director for Vera French Community Mental Health Center.
Thanks. Kevin?
Yeah, Kevin Patiwal, plant administrator at the Finway Group in West Des Moines, Iowa.
Great. Welcome. And then Melina, I see that you're there too,
Yes,
but maybe.
I am Melina, and I am the marketing coordinator at Twin State, and I am the one who usually puts together these events. So thank you so much for joining us today.
And thank you for your hard work. So Melina does a lot of behind the scenes. If you guys have any questions on how to get your marketing efforts seen and you know how to get people to attend events and some of the tips and tricks, or have any follow up, Melina is the person to reach out to. So on topic for today. So starting with some 90s pop culture. Does anybody recognize these two? Does anybody recognize what they're even holding, right? So, you know, technology has changed quite a bit from way back when. We use technology like that big Zach Morris phone, and it's evolving in a way that, you know, cybersecurity is really like a technology arms race, if you use that analogy, right? So if you come and you have your shield and you have your sword, that might work in the medieval times, but now we're fighting a jet fighter, you know, type of war against these cyber criminals, and they're continually coming with new creative ways to attack our our end users, our staff, us directly. And the old ways used to be the old phishing attacks, you know, worms, Trojan horses. We've heard of all of these things. DoD. Anybody know what DoD stands for? Or DDoS, like a denial of service attack.
Mhm.
And then outdated software, right? So way back when Microsoft Office 365 didn't exist, we used those box cases, would install Office 2003, you know, computer to computer. And as updates would come down, we'd go manually update them. But the outdated software, if you're not removing those outdated softwares from your systems, they still pose a big threat. But that's the old way, right? Now it's getting more complicated, right? Zach and AC Slater look like this now, the two from SNL. And now we're doing something completely different. We've got a whole new way that we're getting attacked. Spear phishing and zero-day attacks, of course. Zero-day attacks, we've released some news flashes, if you would, about zero-day attacks. And what that means is that there is no software patch available. So Microsoft, I'm just going to use them as an example because they're popular. But if there's a hole or a security vulnerability in Word, for example, and we know about it, but there's no fix for it yet. That's the zero-day attack, right? Like we don't even have a solution, and yet we have to like figure out what to do, or at least mitigate risks in other areas, which we're going to talk about to to deal with those while we're waiting for vendors or manufacturers to come up with the solution or the patch to the known security flaw. The other thing I'm going to talk about is, and this comes up often, and I think right now in the news, there's so much happening right now with cybersecurity. We've got Russia exploiting, we've got the elections, and recently Uber. Has everyone heard about the Uber breach that has happened recently? So I'll tell you a little bit about it, but this is just evolving the Zach Morris phone now to what we're really using our technology for. Uber was recently attacked, and there's a post that I put on LinkedIn that goes through how they handled their press release, kind of pushing off responsibility to a third-party vendor. Well, what really happened was that third-party vendor was hacked with social engineering. So you'll see on my LinkedIn also, I just posted today a funny Jimmy Kimmel skit of them walking around the city of Hollywood and interviewing people and just asking them some basic questions, and they're actually giving this person with a microphone and a camera their password to their systems. So that's social engineering. And Uber, and the way that we're using Uber, that third party was social engineered. Now Uber says that there was no customer data that was breached, but you'll also read in that post, which I'll send to you all, that you never can really tell when a company has been breached what all really had happened. There's a lot of mixed messaging when we have to notify folks that there's been a sensitive compromise, but it's happening more and more often. So the old myth that we're too small, cyber criminals aren't interested in my type of data, just isn't true anymore. So, the financial institutions, but in reality, government institutions are being targeted. Healthcare institutions are being targeted. Financial is still on the list, but with the transactions, and if you think about it, what are the bad guys really after? They're after something that has monetary value. So if you have sensitive health record information, credit card information, any type of identifiable information that helped them put together two breaches and enough information about Micah, tell a story that now they can start to social engineer me or attack me in new ways. That is really what we're talking about. It isn't just that you're too small. You can definitely be threatened by these external sources. And I'll kind of throw it out there from just a reality perspective of just the few of us in the room. Has anybody had a risk or a concern, even near breach experience with an organization that you thought might just be too small or too quiet to be noticed? All right, quiet crowd. And nobody wants to admit it either, right? Like read that press release on how to handle this. But you'll see it. And often what happens is these press releases come out sometimes a year after the breach has been known, right? So typically these bad guys will actually be in, on average, a system for 90 days before anyone in the organization even knows. So what we're seeing is that these bad guys will live inside of your Office 365 tenant or your G Suite tenant, and they'll watch email flow. They'll look at calendars and find people when they're out of office and then act as them just at the right time. So another story that I'll talk about is, you don't think education or small businesses would be targeted, but recently this school district was attacked. And 66% of our small businesses and medium-sized businesses are getting hit with these attacks. And this is a real true story. So I won't read the numbers to you, but I think it's interesting that the facts are that we are being attacked and it is expensive to recover from them. So the average exposure cleanup that what does it cost if you were breached in any capacity? We get clients that call us as new customers because they aren't following, some principal guidelines. But when they call us for remediation of a problem that they found themselves in, I mean, it's anywhere from $7,500 to $20,000 to recover. We walked into a school district a few years ago, and they had a big virus breach. It happened over the weekend. It exposed a bunch of computers, and the way that the incumbent IT vendor was solving it was that they had teachers and staff walking around to every computer in this school district and inserting a USB drive to do a cleanup with like malware bytes. It took them so much time, and it took them down for 2 days while they were trying to mitigate the risk. But it's really expensive when these things happen. And that's just the average, right? And that's not being sued because of sensitive information that was released. And then they also have the embarrassment of if you're in an industry that has to share an exposure or a cybersecurity attack with the public, it can really decrement the confidence of your customers or your community. So jumping into the cybersecurity attacks really won't hurt me. I mean, I think when we think back to when we got a virus, how did we know, right? My computer would run slow. I would get pop-ups when I was on the internet. Those days are gone, right? It's not so obvious when your computer has actually been infected. And if you're using cloud systems, it's even harder for you to know that your cloud system has been breached. And often that's with an exposed username and password. And then someone is logging in, and you really have no way of telling, except there are a few ways. And we'll go over some of the ways that you can keep in mind to find those bad guys and gals out there that are in our systems. So this slide, we're talking about, the average day to detect a breach is 191 days. It's really true that these folks are living in our systems. And in these statistics, which the links will be in the show notes, talk about what it costs to resolve. Now, some of us are in different regulated industries, right? So healthcare, finance, know your cybersecurity liability. So if you do have an exposure, what is the cost at worst case? And I say that because everyone here is interested in not being a target, or at least avoiding being a target, and then being prepared should you be targeted and hit. Knowing what those exposures are, the cost, will help you justify some of the things that we're going to talk about as best practices. It's like insurance, right? Nobody wants to pay for it, but when you need it and you have to make a claim, it really does have value. And antivirus just isn't enough anymore. And the folks that say they know how to avoid phishing emails, I don't know about you, but I am working from my cell phone so often that it is just tough to see what is a phishing email and what's not. I don't have a mouse to roll over a hyperlink to see if the link is bad or not. So let's get into some food analogies, right? So I like to say cybersecurity is like, a donut. So does anybody recognize this donut? Does anybody know who would enjoy that donut?
Homer?
Right, it's Homer Simpson, right? So you get the prize. But if we think about cybersecurity like Homer's donut, the outside is this crusty shell, and the inside is that warm, gooey middle. How do we identify the different layers of cybersecurity? So if you have to explain this to somebody and they say, oh, we have a firewall, oh, we all VPN in. Well, those are the external crustiness of your donut, if you would. That soft, gooey middle are the Homer Simpsons, right? It's the people that are trying to do their job as fast and as efficiently as possible. And you know what? There's varying levels of technology ability. So you've got someone like me and everyone here that's interested and wants to know the latest and greatest. But you also have those that just computer technology is new. They're too busy. It's not in their job description. And those are the folks that the bad guys are really after because it's the easiest target. But they have to get through, in most cases, those outside protections that the IT team usually implements. So DLP, I just will run through that acronym so that it's not a mystery, but it's data loss prevention, right? So that's where your email system can recognize that a person like Homer here is sending out confidential information, a Excel file or Word document that's been marked as confidential or as not to be sent out of the organization, and it can stop that at the firewall of the email server so that it doesn't go out. So data loss prevention is key, and we're going to talk about how you even identify what types of files and where files are stored to be able to do that. But the technology is there to be able to help folks do their job the best that they can, have that hard crusty outside, protect them the best that we can, but we still need to help those end users at the end of the day. And I'll give you some examples of where we can help them out with. So if you don't like donuts and you prefer onions, it's a similar layered model, right? So you've got the outside as your firewalls. It's just another way of describing to someone that may be a layman of why cybersecurity is important and how what they think is going to help them is just a single piece of the puzzle. So you don't want to cry when it comes to cybersecurity. So think of it as an onion. The other analogy that I like to use is cybersecurity is like layered Swiss cheese. So a firewall alone has a lot of holes in it. A firewall and antivirus, still, you're covering up a few holes from exposure, but it takes almost 7 layers of cheese, if you would, or cybersecurity layers to protect the Homer Simpsons or the end users or the people in your organization. So this layered Swiss cheese analogy or model really can be applied to many different things. This is one that was referring to how to prevent the spread of COVID, right? So starting with the physical and then going all the way to the person with training so that they know how to best protect themselves. So another way of using this is, what are those 7 layers of the onion, of the donut, right? So we know that we need to have good backups. So backing up your information, and that goes to the cloud backups as well. So if you're using Office 365 and you feel like, well, it's there, it's protected, you really need to implement a strategy that is for business continuity and disaster recovery. If your SharePoint gets blown away on accident or intentionally, do you have backups of your cloud SharePoint in Microsoft? If you're using QuickBooks Online, how long are those backups good for and how often are they happening? And have you ever tested them? And the reason why backups is so important is that if you are exposed and you do have a breach and you're hit with the most popular crypto virus that's going to encrypt all your files, how do you recover from that? Well, you could Bitcoin over money to the ransomers and see if you can get your data back and hope that they don't keep a copy of it. Or you can restore from a backup, and now you don't have to pay them anything, and you can now shore up those exposures. But that's the best recovery point, if you would, for an exposure. Allow workflow applications, keeping applications updated, using business class firewall, install email filtering. I mentioned email filtering. It's really important. I don't know how many emails everyone here gets, but upwards in 100 a day. And how many of those are worth the read, right? So if you could trim out with email filtering, just 100 out of your 100 emails, if you could trim out the 20% that are coming in as spam, yes, you are less likely to fall for spam emails, but you'll also get more time back in your day. So that's helping out the people that are getting these emails from even having to think about if this is a good email or not. Now I'm going to talk about there's other ways that it's not just spam coming into us anymore, right? We're also getting text messages saying that my Netflix account needs to be renewed or that my Amazon purchase is held in shipping. I mean, who doesn't have a delivery that you're waiting for from Amazon, right? So these text messages are really convincing, but it's not just email anymore. And it also comes from apparently Jimmy Kimmel on the street, but it can come from the phone calls that we're getting as well. And I really feel for like my parents who don't even expect a phone call to come in to be someone that's actually has any other motive than to sell them something that they don't want. So those calls might be going well. They're not buying anything. They feel like they're being helped, and they've accidentally just given some personal information that's going to help a hacker take something from our parents or someone in that category. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about an enterprise level antivirus. So antivirus, the old McAfee, the old Nortons, really has evolved. So what happened when we got a virus and we did have antivirus, right? It would pop up from down by the clock. It would tell us that we have a virus, but then what, right? It would just wait for the human to now reactively take care of that. So next gen antivirus is now doing something called detection and response. So the response piece is, we know we have a virus on this computer. The system will now alert the team that needs to be responsible, just like the old antivirus would, but it'll also start to take preventative measures from letting that virus go further into the computer network. So it can take the computer offline. It can, in a lot of cases, even start to remediate the virus with known fixes. I mean, these cybersecurity criminals are creating new ways and new softwares all the time to find those zero-day threats, but also, it's expensive to write new bad, invasive code. So they will continue to reuse the same old tried and true virus codes because so many of us aren't taking these 7 layers of protection. So they'll keep knocking on doors until they can use the code that they have to find that vulnerable person out there, computer network. So when I talked about Uber, right? So Uber, how did they get exposed? How did they get hacked? It was bad password management. And I don't know about you, the average American has over 100 password and usernames that they're trying to manage. I mean, just think about the usernames and passwords that you have to create in your daily life. Uh, Everything that I've mentioned so far, YouTube, Netflix, Amazon, all of these are asking you for a username and password. So it's really important to help your audience or yourself with good password management. And there's some easy tools to use that are better than a post-it note and better than a spreadsheet with no password to keep your passwords in order. Recently, we did a presentation on what the pros and cons are of using your social or Gmail account as that single sign-on. So if you're getting to a website that's asking you to create a new account, everyone's familiar where it says, oh, would you like to use Gmail, your Gmail account? Well, what are you giving up and what are you gaining when you make that choice to allow that third party access to your Gmail username and password credentials? Now, they don't get your password when you allow it a third party to do that, but what you will see if you read the terms and conditions, they're getting a lot more than just your email address. They're getting information about your demographics. A lot of times they'll ask for access to your connections, like the people that you know. So be sure to read those terms and conditions, but it is so convenient and it is one less password that you have to manage. However, when you have a breach with your Google, now you've just exposed these other third parties to having to go back and reset those passwords as well. So it's kind of a pro and con. I'll tell you, I use it more often when I trust the third party than if I'm creating an account for something that I don't trust. And I don't know about you, but I actually have a sock puppet account. So how many of you have more than one email address, right? You've got your work and your Gmail, everybody, or whatever your personal account, AOL maybe. Everybody has a second email address, but how many have more than just that? So that way when you sign up for that free raffle at the hockey game, they don't blow you up with a bunch of marketing and remarketing emails. So I made a funny one. Mine is you owe me one too now. And I think that's funny because every time I fill out one of those postcards to get something for free, I just let them know that they owe me one because I'm giving a good email address. And that's also needed for when you need to validate an account setup. So having a sock puppet email address might be an advantage for you. And with Gmail and the other email systems, it's really easy for you to check all those emails in one place or filter down just to the account that's important. So this is why it's so important for your password management. Almost 80% of the breaches are happening because of weak username and passwords. And it's because we use the same ones across the board. So if you think of passwords like the keys to your house, think of this analogy. So we all have all these keys in our key box, but if that key box is sitting in our garage and our garage door is wide open, you've just given the bad guys the ability to get into all of your different accounts or different properties. So keep that in mind as you're creating passwords and accounts with new systems, and know that they're targeting those small businesses, and there's some resources there at the end. I think this is hilarious. So for those of you that are in the Quad Cities, Kevin, I think you're in Des Moines now, but you've seen this because we've actually ran this campaign in the Quad Cities twice in 5 years, right? So Lock It Down QC, it was Lock It Up QC before. I think it's really funny that our public services like the police department have to run huge marketing campaigns just to remind people to lock their vehicles at night. It's the same thing with your passwords. So it's easy, and I put this in perspective because it's it's tough for the people out there, the people that we're trying to protect, the end users, or even ourselves. It is hard. We have so much to keep in mind in so many different accounts that a little bit of advice and reminder can really go a long way. And this actually did work. This has significantly reduced vehicle theft and break-ins with these marketing campaigns, but they're not cheap, so you need to invest in it. So we're going to talk about social engineering and how it can get past firewalls. But here's a fun resource. If you haven't tried this before, this website, haveibeenpwned.com, what it's going to do is it'll ask you your email address. So if you put in any of your many email addresses that we talked about, it'll tell you if that email address has ever been in a known breach. So LinkedIn is one that was exposed several years ago. But if you haven't changed your LinkedIn username and password, well, guess what? Bad guys now can buy on the dark web the username and password to your LinkedIn account. For me personally, I think it would be really detrimental if a fake Micah was out there representing me on my professional network. But there are many others. So Under Armour will show up in here, and Under Armour isn't just the shoe wear, but it's also a lot of the digital watches and things that we wear. Make you sign up for a new account. And those can have a lot of information about you. If you think about Samsung and what it knows and your GPS locations, it can be really scary. So check this out. Have I been pwned? Put in your email address, and it'll tell you where that email address was found on the dark web and what information was actually exposed during that breach. So how do we help the Homer Simpsons, the people in the center of that donut? We've got all the 7 layers of the technology outside of it, but now we need to help the people navigate when things get through the 7 layers of cheese. How do we help them protect themselves? So it's training, it's awareness. So we use a tool called KnowBe4, but basically what we're seeing when we implement this cybersecurity awareness training, which has a program, right? People have to take it, they have to pay attention. There's a little quiz at the end of each scenario, but we see on average, and it depends on what industry you're in, but each industry is between 30 and 40% on the first phishing test that we do. Those folks that get the phishing test will actually fail. They'll click through it. After 12 months of cybersecurity training, we're seeing that get between 2 and 5% for organizations. So this is an ongoing effort because in the life that we live today, we're onboarding new staff, and it's important to keep this not just a one time a year approach. While we have the whole company meeting, we're going to tell them a little bit about cybersecurity. It really needs to happen no less than quarterly. And the methodology that we use is a monthly touch, a quick reminder. Here's what's happening. Here's how you can protect yourself. Here's what to look for. And this, again, it keeps the people safer, but it also gets back time when folks can make those decisions. And they're not also sending known bad emails to the IT department or their manager saying, hey, I'm not sure what to do with this. I think it's a bad email. And now we've just spread that one email to many other people in the organization. So for us, one of the things that we do is we actually will customize the training. So if you've got CFO or financial positions, if you've got healthcare providers, if you've got regular just end users, we have programs for teachers, but basically customizing the training to the job role or the persona or the personality or the of the people that are checking those emails really have a good effect in result of lower failures. And then when we have, and it's true, we'll find in the reports, it's the same habitual violators every month. Like they're just not getting it, or they're too busy, or they're working from their phone in the line of a grocery store. They're too busy, or they're the sales rep and they just hope and pray that every email that they get asking for, a communication or a meeting is a real person. This cybersecurity awareness training on a cadence of monthly and then customized to that persona or customized to the habitual violator so they get more training or more focused training on where they're failing. That's how you can see the improvements. All right, so another food analogy. How many of us are working from home or how many of us are working from a public space? Right? I think we've all had to connect at the airport or we want to get out of the office and we're sitting at the coffee shop. Well, here's the thing to know when you do that, and everybody should be able to, we're living in this remote environment. It's great, but there are some steps that you and your audience should take to help yourself protect the information that's going over those public or business provided wireless connections, right? So I like to say, Wi-Fi is like mushrooms. They pop up everywhere, but a lot of people die every year by misidentifying a good mushroom from a poisonous mushroom. So here's some steps. If you have to connect to public Wi-Fi to avoid the bad guys, listening into the data that you're sending back and forth over the internet, right? So most websites that you see today are going to be HTTPS. And how do you know if it is or isn't? Well, the browser of Google, Firefox, Mozilla, and Apple Safari will all show you in the URL if the website is not have a HTTPS or SSL certificate. You don't need to really know anything except if you go to the URL and you see up there that it's red in Safari or that there's a lock or an unlock icon, that means that you're connecting to a website that would allow someone to set a man in the middle, they call it, set between you and that website and listen into the traffic. So if you're seeing sites and you're trying to do a transaction, I would think twice about making that transaction. Now that's any website, whether you're at your home office or not. Now, if you are working from a public space, a VPN is ideal, right? A virtual private network. So we use Fortinet's VPN client for clients to connect remotely back to their home office or to their cloud network using a secure connection. It's one step, it's one extra password. It's incredibly worth it. The other thing is avoid sending passwords if at all times while you're on a public Wi-Fi. And this is why. So if you're sitting at Starbucks and I start up my Wi-Fi hotspot from my cell phone and I call it Starbucks free Wi-Fi, guess how many people are going to try to connect to my phone? And I can let them. And now all of a sudden I'm that man in the middle. And this innocent coffee sipper is now using my cell phone signal as what they thought the free Starbucks provided Wi-Fi. And then the last one is bank at home, right? So if you're going to be doing any kind of online transactions, using your cellular network rather than the free Wi-Fi provided at the grocery store or Starbucks is a better bet. Whenever I am and here's the steps that I follow. If I'm in a public place and I need to connect to the internet, I do use my cell phone as a hotspot. I make sure that I have to connect to it and have security between the two, meaning that I had to put in a password to connect to my phone, so not just everyone can connect to it. And then I also bring a charger, right? Because that hotspot will drain your phone really quick. But if you're prepared, you can use your cell phone and your data plan to connect back to work or wherever else you need to work from. So this is where, if we're using an analogy like a castle, and you've got these barriers and walls and a moat all around your castle, and inside your castle, what is there that we're trying to protect? It's the digital data that we hold that is the most important thing for us to take account for and also protect. So think about the data that you have. Where is it and what is it? And what has a higher value to a bad guy or gal than other data, right? So documents and critical business systems, think of your QuickBooks, banking information. We had in the very beginning, the highest hit industry were those that moved large amounts of money around. So think of an escrow or a real estate title company that would hold large volumes of money. And then when a purchase of a home would be made, they would let it out of escrow. That is a huge target for the bad guys and gals out there. The other thing is if you have identifiable information about your customers. So credit card information is obvious, but think about anything else personally identifiable, right? So if you can stitch together who Micah is through the information that you have, that's enough to be considered PII, Social Security information and so on. Now, the last time I looked, when I looked to see what had value on the dark web, right? I wasn't shopping. I did some Google searching on the good web, but a social security number really is only worth about $2 to $5. A credit card number, $2 to $5. Isn't that crazy? Health records, $35 to $50, right? So there's a lot more value in some of the data to the bad guys than there is others. But you need to know what data you have, so that way we can come up with a strategy to protect it. So here's an analogy of what bad guys are doing when they're looking for that data, right? So rats look for easy cheese. It's not when you're going to get a mouse, or if you're going to get a mouse, it's when you're going to get a mouse or a rat. And then you need to address where they're going. So rats look for easy cheese, meaning that they're not going to continue to knock on your door if you're protected with 7 layers and you have your end users trained. They're just going to move on to the other million businesses out there that are eligible targets for this. So keeping yourself protected, bad guys are going to move right on into the next business and try to hack them. The other thing is where is your cheese, right? So if your cheese isn't backed up, well, you've just opened it up so that the rats can eat all of your cheese and then walk. If your cheese isn't secure with that like data loss prevention and identified as critical, you may have just made the most valuable part of your cheese right on the edge. So the bad guys get it first. So that's the analogy that I also like to use is that bad guys really are just moving around looking for the easiest targets because there's so many available. So don't be the easy target. Be the one that's got a good system and plan in place. Now, I love this one because I don't know about you, but if you have a data and you have files, how many of it looks like a scene from the TV show Hoarders, right? So we've got multiple copies of things. It's all, and I'll tell you the way I found this to become the biggest problem is that search is so much easier now so that you really don't have to file files away like you used to and keep everything methodically organized. You can kind of throw it into a bucket and then search for it later and find it. If you're teaming with a group, it's really easy for things to get out of hand. But having your data organized so you don't look like an episode of Hoarders is going to really help you identify the important data and then also where it's at so it can be backed up and in the center of all other data. And that's because a lack of governance really is hard to keep organization of your data is very hard. And this is why data exponentially has just grown in volume that's on our networks these days. So I'm just going to repeat the 7 layers of the Swiss cheese model, if you would. It's that good firewall. Our go-to brand is Fortinet. It's email and internet browsing. So keeping your web filter so that those URLs that are known to be bad aren't able to be surfed to within your network. It's going to be securing your Wi-Fi networks. So not using those public Wi-Fi whenever available, taking those steps I shared when you have to, and then also your own Wi-Fi networks within your organization. So if you have a public wireless network, make sure that it's segmented from your business network. Deploy those practices and policies. This is where technology is that hard, crusty shell, but you really need to have policies and training and procedures so that way the humans can follow those when technology can't. And then strong password authentication. So here's a tip. I don't know how many of you are doing multi-factor authentication yet. I just read in my email that Google is going to require multi-factor authentication. It's easier than you think. So a lot of our clients either use the Microsoft or Duo or Fortinet solutions for multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor just means that it's going to ask you for 2 or more things about you before you can get access to the system. So it would likely be your password, something you know, a biometric like fingerprint, something that you are, or something that you have like your cell phone. So when I log into my computer every day, it actually put in my password and then hit send the notification to my phone. And then on my cell phone, I just hit a button and it lets me write in. And of course, using those next gen antiviruses. And then patching is usually something that comes in the best of breed of antiviruses. But what that means is rather than waiting for the Adobe and Microsoft update notice to come popping up next to the clock on your computer, have a computer system that is just going to push out good updates to your computer network so that way the people don't even have to think about it. And I hate rebooting my computer. So if the IT department here asked me to update every week or every month, that means I'd have to shut everything down. Just do it for me and then remind me to shut my computer down or force me later on so that those updates can be applied. So I have an opportunity for some Q&A. We have a few minutes left. I have some staged questions if it was a quiet crowd, but let me know what's on your mind. We've covered quite a bit there. I can go back to a slide if you want to see it again. What questions do we have in the audience or stories to tell about any of those analogies or even a better analogy?
Yeah, I had a question since we have Fortinet here with us.
Yeah.
What is like right now, as Micah told you earlier, Zach, I've got Fortinet firewalls here, and one thing I'd be curious on, at least to know more on, is the NDR strategy you guys have.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like one thing that we've done is we've deployed an EDR solution, which I think is much better than what we've had in the past with classic signature-based antivirus. And so I'd really like to hear kind of what is it like. I have my firewall. I have IPS, IDS, content filtering, all that good stuff. And now I'm looking at taking it to the next level with NDR. And what's that look like? And what does Fortinet do?
Yeah, fun.
So, I mean, from an account management standpoint, I definitely like to loop in one of my SEs to talk deeper into it from a technical aspect. But, what we've seen is a big uptick within FortiCloud and our endpoint protection. So EPP, helping remediate those. I know Twin was talking about that earlier. It's kind of that next level behind the know before, obviously, helping the end users create policies and trainings on identifying those phishing attacks, but being able to isolate those machines at the endpoints would probably be the next step. It's just kind of creating the next layer within that analogy of the Swiss cheese.
And just so everybody on the line knows, so like EDR is that endpoint detection and response. Luke, you were saying MDR. If I understood you say, was that what you're saying? EDR or MDR?
NDR, so network detection and response. So Fortinet
Right.
has a product called Forti NDR, I think, and I'd just
Yep.
like to know more about it.
So there's a lot of third parties out there too, and Twin State goes to a lot of conferences and meets a lot of these vendors looking for the best of breed. So often, it's, I don't know about you, but I don't want to work 24/7 and watch the logs and then, read the logs while I was away from my desk when I get back to my desk. The SOC and that managed service is available. Fortinet has the Forti Analyzer that can collect the information and then send it off to yourself or a third party for analysis and identify, anything that looks to be like malpractice. And then it all blends into that Forta mesh where you've got, if you do the whole Forta mesh, even the Forta phones, now they're actually watching the Internet of Things or the devices that don't have a person behind it, but yet still connect to the internet and can be exposed.
Okay, thank you.
What other questions do we have? That was a good one, Luke. Keep them coming. I will say I just had this conversation the other day about the difference between disaster recovery and business continuity. And I think everybody on the phone probably knows, but I thought that this was an enlightening conversation because as I was talking to this customer, when we talked about business continuity, where they were at was with the turnover in staff that's happening right now, or succession planning because our demographics of humans working in the United States, baby boomers are retiring. So a lot of succession planning is in place right now with HR and an organization, but it goes into IT and technology as well, right? So continuity planning means identifying where everything is, like that hoarder slide that I had shown. But I think you'll find if you start asking that a lot of folks in an organization have found an easy solution to a complex problem, but did not involve IT, right? So there's these Dropbox accounts out there in the world, or we're using a single Gmail account to collect contact forms that IT did not know about. So having your data and systems mapped out, but then also coming up with that continuity plan. So it's not just what if the IT system went down, but what if that person wasn't here anymore to do that function? How do we plan for that? And that's kind of the difference. The recovery planning means that we're going to back up and restore data, but the continuity means if a system went down, what would be the workaround? Or if a person wasn't here to do the job, what would be our workaround?
That's a great point. I agree 100%. What is if you have staff who are no longer available? I've found anyway, very French, what's helped us is we document their workflow so that when a staff member comes in, they actually have something to refer to. Because to your point, it's easy to plan for disaster recovery, but to try to plan for every business continuity, and we're not the ones in IT that do it. We push
Yeah.
back at the business and say, hey, what is it that you guys do? Because we don't know.
hmm So like where IT can help, I mean, creating documentation is really helpful. It allows people to scale. Sometimes humans don't want to do documentation because it feels like, I'm giving away my secret and now everyone would be able to do my job. But more often than not, the person or the human behind it is just too busy, right? We're already asking everyone to do more than we used to 5 years ago, because of the staffing situation that we're in right now. But making it easier for them to document. So I always share this, but if you're not using it, Windows Shift uh, S will allow you to take a screenshot. You can take 5 or 6 screenshots of while you're doing your process, put it in the clipboard, and then go to your Word document and then do a Windows L. And I'll send these out afterwards, but um, rather than a Control V for paste, if you do Windows V for the pasting function, it'll have all those 5 screenshots queued up in your clipboard. So that way you don't have to go take a screenshot, paste it, take a screenshot and paste it. So some of those tips and trainings can help users or the people that are trying to do their best do what they need to do or being asked to do a little bit easier. And then there's that Windows recorder function too, which will actually record, like the problem steps recorder. It'll record their process. So if they're in a particular business application, they can go through their daily routine, and this thing will document every click that they're doing and kind of pump out that documentation. And even if it isn't perfect, having them go through that once, the day that you need it, I bet you're willing to look at the 20% of that document that's invaluable and dump out the rest where they may have clicked a couple of times on accident somewhere and hit back. So there's some technology out there that can make that a little bit easier. Any other questions? One of the things that we hadn't talked about yet, but I was kind of wondering if someone would bring up was cybersecurity insurance. Is that on the top of anyone's mind?
That keeps getting tougher and tougher for requirements. I can tell you that. Yeah.
It does, yeah. And here's the reason is because it's, the vulnerabilities are so wide and spread, it's really expensive to insure somebody. And when people are getting hacked, we're talking about big dollars now. So cybersecurity insurance, what's going to let you do is, have an insurance policy so that if you do get hacked, you can not only get yourself back up online, but even if you were scammed out of tens of thousands or millions of dollars, like that's a claim, right? But the things that these cyber insurance companies are asking for is a survey saying that you have policies and procedures written down that, and then also, that is when the questionnaire gets handed over to IT to click the boxes to say that we have a firewall or next gen antivirus. But it goes further than the IT department for sure. The one thing in cyber insurance is if you don't have it now, be thinking about it and ask your insurance provider how much it would cost, because there is if you have those steps taken in those, like Luke mentioned, harder and harder surveys to pass, it should help you in other areas. So I don't see anybody on the line that like does Department of Defense contracts, but if you're working with any federal entity, so that could be Medicare or a state entity like Medicaid, or you're working with anything that's financial, having that insurance survey passed should help you with some of the other areas that you can save money. So if you take credit cards online or even with a terminal at the front desk, like PCI compliance, the questions that are on your cybersecurity insurance are going to be very similar to those that will lower your rate per transaction with your credit card merchant or transaction host. So if you're paying 5% or 3% for your credit card transactions, taking these steps can help you negotiate a lower rate and then offset some of the cost of what it takes to do cybersecurity right. The one thing I'll say to friends on the phone today is if you were ever to get yourself into a situation where you feel like you've been hacked, money has been moved, if you would to call us, we'll jump on it with you, but we have been in close contact with the local FBI, and there is a process right now. The window in which you need to let them know so they can take remediation and try to get your money back has gotten smaller, right? It used to be a few days. They could implement what we call a kill chain and like reverse the money transfer. It's getting down to just a day. So as soon as you smell fire, you should let us know, and we'll jump in there and fight the fire with you and see what we can do to help out and reach out to those contacts that we have. Because a lot of times what we've seen is some organizations have a breach, but they are afraid to admit it, right? Like they don't want this to get leaked out to the public. The money wasn't enough for them to, you know, close their business, and they would rather just take it on the chin. It's there's more to offer to help than having to brute the force on your own. So if you run into something, let us know. We'd be happy to help out. Well, with just a few minutes left, I'll ask again if anybody has any other. Well, let me ask Luke or Zach. I would imagine Kevin, maybe if you've got any other analogies that I could add to my deck or storytelling later on that are around cybersecurity that you use when you're describing something complex to someone else. All right. Well, if you think of any, please let me know. I'll come up with a funny picture to go with it if you don't have one already. And I'd like to expand on those. And with that, I want to say thank you to everybody for joining. Melina will follow up with a follow-up email. It'll include that cybersecurity risk assessment. It's like a points tallying questionnaire that'll help you kind of just find out how you are on your maturity of cybersecurity and then give you a grade at the end. If you find that there's some weak spots or some tech that you're wanting to check out, reach out, and we'd be happy to help out navigating the vast amount of options that are out there and then working in the most cost-effective and most quality products that are available. And the last thing I'll say is stay tuned. We invite everyone to these events through our VIP invite list. It comes usually with our newsletter. So stay tuned, and if you have suggestions, let Melina know, and we'll do an event on something that you care about most.
Sounds good. Thanks, Micah. That was a good presentation.
Thanks for the feedback.
Yep. Thanks, Micah.
Yeah, appreciate
All
it.
right, everybody. Take care. Talk to you soon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Melina. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.